town you never heard of.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Common Folk Podcast with Ben, Morgan, and Andy.
Welcome back to Common Folk.
Hey, how's it going, Andy?
Cold. Andy's kicking it off over there.
There we go.
Never fails. Andy's always a drinker.
Oh, Andy gets pegged with that.
Yeah, how'd I get that?
You guys, I'm always throwing darts at Andy.
I feel like you were the one that asked about it 2 or 3 times before
Actually, I totally was. I was going to have a margarita if someone else was, but no one else wanted to have one for lunch. So.
Oh, shucks. I wish I would have known.
You know.
Man,
I mean, it's 5 o'clock somewhere. Always.
it always is. That's true. It's, as Andy said, a little bit cold outside, but I feel like it's hot in here.
Well, I had the
warming up.
heater on. I'm always freezing.
Gosh, dang.
You're the one that's cold, too.
I'm good right now.
All right. Well, you probably have your long underwear on.
I do. Yep.
Me too.
You too?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, Andy, you too?
Not right now, no.
Or I like to call them guy leggings, and he will
Right,
argue that.
yeah.
He's like, guys don't wear leggings.
It's not what it is.
But long underwear, it's the same thing.
No, you
Yeah.
wear pants over them.
Yeah, they're long
Yeah.
johns.
Yeah.
They're long johns.
Yeah, I guess true.
Mm-hmm.
Girls just wear leggings,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
guys wear leggings and then wear pants over them.
No, we don't. We wear long underwear or long johns for
Okay.
slang. And you can wear them for dog walks in the morning, chop wood, deer hunting.
That's true. Chop a lot of wood in my
Yeah.
long underwear.
God.
There is dudes that are starting to wear those pants though.
Yeah.
I've
They're
seen-
like
I've seen
kind of
dudes-
tighter on the top and like they're like,
I've
Really?
seen dudes walking around in those pants.
Well, it's kind of a trend now of basketball players. There's some male basketball players that like wear those leggings
under
Yeah.
there's shorts.
under their shorts.
Yeah, but there's a bunch of dudes wearing them just like by themselves.
Yeah. But they probably get manicures and pedicures too.
There's a couple of my buddies, we've talked about this. There's a very real thing that a lot of guys' fashion started as women's fashion, and it eventually turns into what guys wear. So like if you look at a lot of things that guys wear, women were probably wearing it first. And
Like
I
the
mean,
soccer pants.
especially in the urban atmospheres.
Not this guy.
Yeah, not you. No, you don't look like you're wearing any girl stuff.
That's funny because it's the reverse happened back in the 50s and 60s where only men wear blue jeans. And then, women started wearing blue jeans, and it was more than just a fashion statement. It was a statement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now, I mean, it's more commonplace to see a woman wearing a pair of blue jeans than a miniskirt in a lot of settings.
But then what happened is the women took it and then put their spin on it as far as like how it fit, the length, the skinny jean thing and all
Right.
this.
Yeah.
Bedazzled.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then dudes started doing it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, well, whatever. Let's get to what
Brief
we're
history of fashion with
Yeah, exactly.
get to-
Right, because we're fashionistas here.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, we have guests.
Yeah, I'm about to get to it.
Okay.
All right. So, we're here with my buddy Vaughn. I can call you my buddy, right?
Absolutely.
All right.
We've known each other a long time.
I know.
It's been a while now. Vaughn Hammond. So where we're at, so a lot of folks that listen, we have a number of listeners that are from around the Midwest, but a lot of them are all over the U.S., even into other countries from a lot of the stuff Andy's tracking in the analytics. So a lot of people don't understand like regional references, but in the Midwest here, in working in agriculture, folks kind of know our story where we moved back in 2015 and started the business and got involved in the soil biological category and working with sustainability and regenerative and working on the soil and those types of things.
Which is how we met.
That's, exactly how we met. So myself and Andy, actually, we hadn't talked about this. Andy was doing the same thing in northeast Nebraska, which is how we originally met. So myself here in this area, running around, meeting farmers, meeting growers, meeting producers. That's how we came across you were running an operation in charge of that side of that piece. So naturally, you and I got to talking about some of these products I had and some stuff you were already using. And little did I know at the time, I was meeting a guy and tapping into a resource that was going to be very beneficial for myself and my understanding of the category, because you had so much to share. And then throughout those years, we kind of stayed in touch as you went to some different operations and my business changed and so on and so forth. And then fast forward to today, which another episode that we're going to have coming out, we came across this operation down here in Nebraska City that you're helping build and run. And that's what got us back in touch. So it was kind of crazy. I'm talking to the owner, and he says, well, I got a guy you got to talk to. He's the interview guy. You need to talk to Vaughn. And I'm like, Vaughn Hammond?
Wait a minute.
Yeah. And he's like, yeah, you know him? And I'm like, yeah, that's who's running your deal down there? That's great.
Yeah, yeah.
So we go down there today, meet up with you, and we'll get to that later. But from what I know of you and everywhere you've been around, and even like we go to lunch today, like you know a ton of people, obviously. You've been around here for a while.
Too many.
Yeah, that can happen. Yeah. What I wanted to do was talk a little bit about how you are and how you came up and what you've been involved in and what you're doing today. So
Cool.
Everybody meet Vaughn, and I'd like to start with, is this where you were born? Is this where you grew up?
Well, I was born in Hamilton County, Nebraska.
Okay.
Grew up in Aurora, basically is where I was born and raised. My mom's side of the family were immigrants from Denmark and had set up farmsteading in Hamilton County in a little Lutheran community called Kronberg, about 15, 20 houses based around a church, had a little general store and all that kind of stuff. And our family farm was right next door. And, you know, to this day, our family's buried on our property line and can see the farmstead right next door.
Yep.
I was coming of age in the 80s when we had the farm crisis. My parents divorced. That's a very diversified deal. My mom came from agriculture. My dad's side of the family, being in Nebraska, this is a little odd, but we're into exotic animals.
Okay.
Really?
Yeah. My grandfather was a professional Santa Claus and had a herd of reindeer, a Macy's Day Parade, the whole bit, traveled the United States being Santa Claus. And that was my dad's side of the family, so it was always interesting going to Grandpa's place because he knew every carnival, anybody that had exotic animals. We'd show up and there'd be polar bears there because somebody was coming through town. And so it's kind of strange. That seems like a pretty exciting life,
Yeah.
but I was more drawn to the agriculture. And so as we grew up, I wanted to be a farmer. We spent every summer out at my grandparents' place, and it was not to be. My mom was a florist, and I started wondering, well, why couldn't I grow what my mom sells? And so that's kind of what got me down the path of alternative ag is the best way. I've never been corn, wheat, and soybeans. Mm-hmm. I've always been lettuce, tomatoes, nut trees, apple trees, all that other things, you know. And so that's kind of the direction I went then. Didn't start off with that. Got into the trees after I got out of high school and was a tree trimmer for a number of years, and then decided I'd go to get a degree in horticulture and got a degree in horticulture. A little later in life, I didn't start college till I was 22 or something like that, and graduated with the degree in horticulture. And the day after graduation, I'd gotten a job out on Long Island and packed up and moved to Long Island and managed a acre of hydroponic salad greenhouse out there. And we started a produce company that serviced New York City, the Hamptons, Montauk, high-end type of stuff, and did that for a few years. Met my wife out there. She was a Nebraska girl.
A Nebraska girl out there?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's kind of interesting. The dude I worked for out there had a degree in international studies from the University of Nebraska. and he was trying to save his family's potato farm. And so he, in college, had worked at Cornell. It's where he got his bachelor's degree. One of the projects he worked on was this hydroponic deal. So ultimately, after he got his master's degree in international studies from UNL, he implemented this whole program on their family farm. So we grew an acre of salad greenhouse and then 20 acres of specialty crops, jalapenos, yellow tomatoes, baby squash, that type of stuff, and then sold that. And my wife came out there as an intern. She hated me at first sight, literally. Oh, I can remember the day. We have the new girl coming, you got to be here. We're going to stop early. We're going to stop at 6 o'clock. And this was the type of job that this got me introduced to my unhealthy work ethic. We would work 40 hours by Tuesday, crash for 24, work for 40, crash.
Oh, my gosh.
And did this nonstop. And so it was the end of the day. We're going to quit early at 6 o'clock and we're going to go to dinner. And so, I was long hair back then, as I am now. And sitting there with me in my shorts on the picnic table, and this girl from Nebraska comes around the hedge, and she sees who she knows is going to be her new boss, and it was like, oh my God, this is my boss, and it was like hate at first sight. So we worked together for a while, and actually the business sold. She stayed with the business. I went with the new owners to another produce company and a farm stand. I managed a farm stand out on Long Island, and you talk about a farm stand and blah, blah, blah. Well, it was the size of a garage, and we do over $1 million a year in sales. It was an incredible place. But that's when we decided that, we were compatible. So we were out there for a bit, we're going to have a baby, and decided, and literally Joey Buttafuoco was our neighbor. Lorena Bobbitt was our other neighbor.
Oh, boy.
And we decided, you know what? We're not going to raise our kids here.
Yeah.
So we packed up, and it was, it was a big decision. I got my end of year check, and we packed up, and we just decided on 1 week we were moving back home.
Oh my gosh. And how old were you?
I was in my late 20s at that point. Yeah.
But it's still pretty ballsy when you've been out there for a while.
Yeah. It was. And we had no jobs. We were confident that we'd hope we'd find something. Well, we got back here, and it was, started, in my younger years in the farm crisis, and farming wasn't in my books, and then moved back to Nebraska in the early 90s, and that's when nobody was getting jobs out of college. And so a big business out on Long Island was estate gardening. So my wife and I decided, you know what, we'll start doing some estate gardening. And so we put some flyers up in Lincoln, and after the first week, we both had 40 hours of work a week. And ultimately, this word's thrown out a whole lot, but we were blessed. We got in with the upper 10% income bracket of Lincoln, and we did extremely well for 11 years until success was either the business or the family. And our clientele was not a clientele that you could sell.
Okay.
And so we just decided to divest. And I went to work ultimately, doing some odd jobs. But ultimately, I'd always been very involved with the University of Nebraska through, my being alumni and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And I was pretty well known in the horticulture department. And somebody from the university called up and said, hey, we got this viticulture research position open. Would you be interested in applying? So I did, and I got the job, and I became research viticulturist for the University of Nebraska, working with Dr. Paul Reed at the beginning of the resurgence of wine and grapes in the state of Nebraska. And so did that for a while. It was a grant-supported position, a grant that was implemented by the Kimmel Foundation, based out of Lincoln, but originally that foundation's money source was Richard Kimmel out of Nebraska City. And so did that for a while. And one of the research sites, we planted I think it was 5 research vineyards in southeast Nebraska, one of them being at the Kimmel Orchard. And ultimately, I got a job with Arbor Day working at the orchard in support of the vineyard that we had planted there. Mm-hmm. So I became a orchard person for the for Kimmel Orchard. Arbor Day actually was the managing group at that point. Well, at that point, the Dean of Extension, Albert Dickey, was working with Kimmel closely and said, if we ever get this project going at Kimmel, I'm going to pull you back to the university if it works out. And lo and behold, a few years, all of a sudden, I'm working again for the university as a extension technologist. So that was basically not an extension educator because I didn't have a master's degree, but it was doing everything that an extension person would do, plus field work, actual hands-on. And so Albert said, if you get your master's degree, I'll bring you on as a full-time extension educator. And I said, hard money. I'm going, okay, well, that sounds good. So I got my master's degree in entomology. And true to his word, Albert pulled me on as a extension educator in specialty crops. I hate to say it, but I'm kind of considered a local foods expert. Part of my stuff was food safety, GAPS, good agriculture practices. And so I would deal with anything that wasn't corn, wheat, and soybeans, as I'd like to say back then, anything that wasn't corn, wheat, and soybeans and legal in the state of Nebraska, I dealt with. Mm-hmm. So it was vegetables, orchard crops, small fruits, high tunnels, greenhouse, vegetable production, aronia, a little bit of hops, hazelnuts, just those specialty crops. And so became an extension educator and did that for several years. And then the Nebraska National Guard was getting deployed to Afghanistan. And they had what was called the Agriculture Development Team number 2. And so they came to me and spent, a couple weeks, and I'd spend 2 or 3 or 4 hours and more talking about the stuff, teaching them about what I knew because they were going to an agriculture area in Afghanistan.
What year was that?
That was 2010 or so. And so at the end of this whole deal, he said, are you interested in going to Afghanistan with us?
Oh, gosh. I knew you were going to say that.
I got to say real quick, I know you're trying to take notes over there, Ben, but there is no way that you kept up with Aurora to Long Island, circus animals. Your grandfather was the Macy's Day Santa.
And my dad was the Hams Beer Man.
The Hams Beer Man. Get out of here. Yeah. And then we go to the University of Nebraska. Lorena Bobbitt was dropped in there as a neighbor. Like,
next town over,
I wonder if anybody listening doesn't know who she was.
Chop, chop.
Everyone has to know.
Yeah, that was a wild story, man.
I don't think our kids would know.
Yeah. They shouldn't know.
Yeah. No, but anybody our age or older would definitely know.
God, that reminds me of a terrible joke. Should I say it real quick? I bet I have.
Is it a dad joke? Or?
I don't know what you would call it.
Okay.
But these two dudes were driving behind their friends, Lorena Bobbitt, and what was the guy's name?
Joey Buttafuoco.
Buttafuoco. Yeah, Joey Buttafuoco. And the car's all swerving all over and like, oh, man, what do you think's going on up there? And then all of a sudden, whop, something hit the windshield, and the guy goes, oh, my God, look at the size of the dick on that bug you hit.
You're so bad.
That is a horrible joke.
Yeah. I thought it was nicely done, though.
There we go. And I bet I forgot that joke even existed.
So I wrote down a couple of quick things I want to ask you. So you mentioned that your non-wife at the time had moved up there. Mm-hmm. So she must have just finished her degree. What was her degree in?
Horticulture. She's actually a better horticulturist than I am. I mean, she was the real roots of the whole estate gardening deal. I mean, she was a Martha Stewart type gardener.
So that was my second question, is explain estate gardening.
Basically, our business plan was we took care of landscapes, high-end landscapes, no
Okay.
mowing, no anything, just go in and take care of their pretties, so to speak, which that changed over the years. The first time I turned a $200 a week mowing job down was the day I decided, maybe it's worth hiring somebody to do that. So we ended up having, ultimately, when it was all said and done, we had our core of regular customers that was our bread and butter, but we had about 125 different residences that we'd visit throughout the year at some point, some of them weekly, some of them monthly. And we mowed about 75 yards, and then snow removal. My mom never could wrap her head around the fact that during the winter we didn't work. Well, she didn't realize 1 inch of snow paid for our whole month's needs.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of a shock that to her that we could actually do that.
Right. Yeah.
You know.
Those are the main things I was wondering. I
Yeah.
thought those are kind of some interesting points. So.
Yeah.
Well, then Afghanistan too. Like I left out Afghanistan
So
in
that's
2010.
yeah, so that's where we were. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's where we were at. So, so I said I have to ask permission from my two bosses, my dean and my wife.
Yeah.
And both of them said yes, and it wasn't that easy. So the next deal was, well, you need to talk to Howard Buffett. I'm going, Howard Buffett? Well, here's his cell phone. Well, that's Warren Buffett's son, who was the Department of Interior, Director of Department of Interior at that point.
Did you at this time, did you have kids?
Yes, I did. We did. We had 3 children at that point,
Okay.
which was a major factor in the whole deal.
Yeah.
So most people that go over to Afghanistan as a civilian, I was never in the military, but they go through a contractor group and they help them do that. Well, I was kind of an independent, so it took me literally a year of 40 hours a week doing the things that I needed to do, which the university was gracious enough to support, as well as I did a little bit of my other stuff. I did a lot of speaking, a lot of conferences, speaking at conferences and whatnot about the subjects that I'm considered well versed at, and it's crazy things that you have to go through, like role playing, like you've been captured and you're sitting in a chair and you're watching the video of you tied up in a chair with an interrogator with a sword behind you and a gun over here, and what would you do if they were put,
Oh my God.
scenario. Yes. So there was a year of that type of stuff. And I'm not a small guy, and there's certain BMI, body mass index, that you had to reach, which I was really nervous at that point because, And so did that for a year, and then all of a sudden it's, you're flying down to Fort Benning to go through the pre-deal. And I'm going, okay, that's what. So ultimately did that for 2 weeks, and at the end of it they said, oh yeah, you're going. And so then let's get on a big old freaking C-130 or whatever it is, and you fly to Germany and then fly to, where was it? I don't know. All I know, it was 120 degrees at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Kuwait.
Oh, okay.
And then to Afghanistan. So I was in Afghanistan for 11 months and directly embedded with a National Guard group. And we would go out on missions, sometimes every day, sometimes 2 a day. Sometimes we'd take a skip and not do a few days. But my commander at the time, he tells everybody I did 100 missions. Well, that's not true. I probably did closer to 60. But still, that's going outside the wire. You got full body armor. And it's pretty awe-inspiring for me to realize that here's these 27 to 60 people that are armed, your escorts, and they're taking you out to teach farmers what you know.
So so that was, I think, a big question that probably everyone listening right now is wondering, why were you there? Like I might have missed that in the beginning
what
here,
are you
but
doing?
I was
What are
there
you
to
doing?
help the farmers grow something other than poppies.
And this is the Afghan farmers.
Afghan farmers, yes. And so we were at Fob Gardez, which is in the Paktia province of Afghanistan, 60 miles south of Kabul, about 30 miles east of the Pakistani border. And the FOB that we were on, Forward Operating Base, was a helicopter base. So it was only helicopters, no fixed aircraft. And it was actually the site of the very first Special Forces mission into Afghanistan. A klot is the structure that the Afghan family lives in, large family unit lives in. It's kind of like a mud castle, sort of, 20-foot walls that are 10 foot thick and gates that close so the marauders can't take whatever there is, and the family units, whether it's mother and father and all the children, all the sons basically, and their wives and their children's live in. That structure was actually the structure that Osama bin Laden and his cronies planned 9/11. And so Special Forces came in and made that the very first mission to take that piece of property back to say, hey, we can do whatever we want. And it was pretty awe-inspiring. My barracks was less than 150 feet from this structure.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty
A little bit of a
amazing.
statement there.
Yeah.
And for those that aren't well reversed in Afghanistan and its exports, or have watched Ozarks, the series,
Yeah.
you mentioned poppies. What's the deal with poppies?
Opium and heroin.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it was rather interesting. Paktia was only one of only a handful of provinces in Afghanistan that actually did not grow poppies, which then made them available to the ADT help. And so our commander was a lieutenant colonel at that point, which then gave him the ability to bring in, I think it was $75,000 a month at that point, that myself and then two other military gentlemen, Bob Hutes and I'll think of his name here, Reese was his last name. Anyway, that we would disseminate out in programming education classes for Afghan farmers. Now, the kicker was we could only spend $5,000 on a program at a time. And those programs were down to $1. So we had $75,000 that we had to spend that way every year. So it was things like shearing sheep, which I didn't know anything about, but I learned about it, giving vaccinations, making edible fodder out of straw. So composting using urea to decompose the straw into edible for the cattle, apple growing, high tunnel growing, vegetable growing, just any number of things like that. And really, Afghanistan is a hugely agriculture region. It's really quite the phenomenal country when you look at the diversity of agriculture that they actually happen to have. Small scale for the most part, and mostly by hand, but the diversity is incredible.
That's interesting because like someone like myself who's never been there, and I only hear and see what I see on the news or hear on the news or whatever, all I think is just desert wasteland that couldn't grow anything.
Actually, very much so. Very much. Chris Reese was the other gentleman. But very much so. I mean, Gardez in Pashto is dust, so, and it's so dusty, 70% of the dust is actually sheep fecal matter that has broke down because they have huge flocks of Karakul sheep over there. And it was one of the maladies that the soldiers in that area would come home with, is they'd get all this stuff in their lungs. Yeah. And then it would, it would really affect them. But did that for 11 months and came home once during that time and had some pretty interesting experiences during that whole deal. And still have some of the interpreters. Some of the interpreters we were able to get out, and some of them are still over there. And still hear from some of the guys over there that are still there and growing apples and doing the different things that they do. Our commander is now a general. While we were there, we actually got bumped up to 100,000 because he got promoted to lieutenant to colonel, full bird colonel, and then has since been progressed to being a general in the Nebraska National Guard. So
Interesting.
Wow.
and then hang.
So the interpreters, you said something about like getting some of them out or whatever. Did they come? Some of those guys come to the States, or ladies, or whoever they were.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some of them have. Some of them been very successful. They've all assimilated into society pretty well. Some of them extremely successful. And some of them have not. And some of those stories are not good.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah. Does that play into all the stories around the pullout, just a few years ago, and how so many of those people got left behind, and then you started hearing stories and seeing movies of guys going back. I think The Covenant was one of them.
Yeah.
Is it that kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And to be quite frank, after I got back, I applied for a couple positions, got hired for both. One of them was Afghanistan is divided into 3 or 4 different regions, and I got basically hired. I'd been to D.C. 3 times, and I was scheduled to go for my 4th time, after which I was supposed to give my notice to the university, but I got basically hired to be the head USDA person of one of the regions in Afghanistan. Then the pullout happened, total pullout, and then they withdrew that position. But quite frankly, it was probably one of the most fulfilling things that I'd ever done, and whether it's good or not, I'd probably still be there if I could.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I never even knew that you had done that.
Yeah.
Well, there's so many stories like that where people that actually had their boots on the ground and saw the progress, saw the everyday people and the lives that you were changing, and the commerce that you were bringing to the table. People probably didn't think about growing, different types of fruit trees around there until you showed them.
Oh, no.
It was life-changing what you were doing.
Some of it was, but actually, in the early 1900s, Afghanistan was the darling of international irrigation. The Afghans, so we were in the Hindu Kush, and our altitude was 1.5 miles. So we were way up there, and you walk out in the morning and here's snow everywhere. It didn't matter if it was July. I mean, you're
Wow.
you're right there, and there's so much water. And I'm not kidding you. An Afghan farmer can move water uphill with a shovel.
That sounds interesting.
It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal.
Wow.
But they were the darlings of irrigation back in the early 1900s. I mean, their agriculture is huge, and they did grow apple trees. And one of my favorite stories is they brought, they could make appointments and come onto the fob with their problems. And so, they'd have to be vetted and everything. And this guy brings his apples, and they were obviously just rotten apples. Just nasty, rotten apples. And, well, what's the problem? This is happening to my apples on my tree. And I'm looking at it, and I'm very hesitantly telling him they needed to be picked a month ago. So I tell him that. I said, they're rotting on the tree because they're too ripe. And he's telling me, who are you to tell me that these apples should have been picked a month ago because my grandfather's father picked apples on the 14th of September. My grandfather picked apples on the 14th of September. My father picked apples on the 14th of September. And you're telling me I should have picked apples on the 1st of September? Infidel.
Yeah. Wow.
And so it's
He didn't mean to do that, but
it's agriculture steeped in tradition.
Yeah.
Steeped in tradition. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. And, a lot of our security teams were law enforcement, and, marijuana is not mentioned in the Quran. And they would actually grow marijuana right up to the bases line, which was great for the farmers because it's protected. American soldiers are right here. We would do nothing with that. If it was poppies, we'd destroy it. But we would allow the farmers to cultivate their crop, harvest their crop, disseminate their crop. Then special forces would follow that crop to where they produced and turned it into hashish by the Taliban. and then the special forces would come in and destroy the crop. So the farmer always got his income,
Yeah.
but the Taliban didn't get the final line.
Oh,
So-
I like that.
Yeah, it worked out pretty well. But they used to goof on that all the time. We'd be out on a mission, and there'd be, we'd be going through a field, and this one guy, he just happened to be in law enforcement, and he'd made a major. He was major undercover and made this major deal in Lincoln that was a huge deal, and he'd just goof on it, and he'd take these pictures and send them back home and to his buddies back in law enforcement, saying, this is what I deal with every day here.
Go.
Different world.
Yeah,
Different
it's the fast
world.
lane.
Yeah.
So you came back from there, and as you said, you still kind of had some contact with that throughout the years.
Right, but I was over there also as an extension educator.
Yeah.
So I worked for the Department of Interior as a subject matter expert in agriculture, but I was also a representative of the University of Nebraska extension, working with Paktia University in Gardez, Afghanistan. So I had a kind of a joint appointment. So when I came back from Afghanistan, I was still a University of Nebraska extension educator, which was really strange because my first farm visit back, I took 2 weeks off after I got back. And my first visit back was to a vineyard outside of Union, Nebraska. And number one, I was driving, which was really weird. And number two, I didn't have 70 pounds of gear on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm driving by myself to this farm visit, and I'm just sitting here in utter amazement. 3 weeks ago, this was a whole different story.
Yeah.
Yeah. So continued that with the university for 2 more years, and then a group at Union Orchard, called me up and said, I bought an orchard in Union, Nebraska. They lived in Colorado, and we've never done anything like this, and I bought this for my son's career. Would you consider being his mentor? And so ultimately, after we negotiated, it was worthwhile for me to leave the university system, and I became their mentor for 2 years at Union Orchard. And then Kimmel Orchard called it back up because that's where my office was located, and it kind of, they needed some help at that point, and I was kind of a problem solver, and I have an eye for detail, and they asked me to come back and manage the orchard there. So I went back to Kimmel, managed that for a little bit of time, a few more years, and then after that, an opportunity came up at Vallis Pumpkin Patch in Gretna, Nebraska, and I became the agriculture manager there, which when I was hired there, I said, hey, you got 4 years because I'm retiring in 4 years. And they said, that's great. We'll look for somebody that's, not as far along in their career that we can bring along. And so we hired a young man by the name of Kyle Willis, who took over as the agriculture manager at Vallis, and I retired, and now I'm back to growing lettuce and water.
Not really retired, still working.
Well, yeah, but it's all good.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
all good.
He really mentioned that fast.
He
there.
did.
But I think people need to get their mind around what Vallis is.
Before
operation.
Vallis, let me ask real quick about Union.
Sure.
How do you think that those folks from Colorado became aware of you and decided to bring you into that?
I'm known.
Okay.
My reputation preceded me, good or bad.
Yeah.
Good or bad.
I'm sure it's all good.
That right at that time frame, excuse me, was when you and I met.
Correct.
That's when I was starting our business, and someone had mentioned to me about you and your affiliation with the university. I had no idea who you were. We hadn't been here for 10 years. We had been moving around the country. We had just come back and really getting into this industry. I'd never really been in this industry before. But your name kept coming up. And then the Union Orchard was within my territory on the product, and I had heard that you were down there, so I came down there, and I mean, must have been like right when you made that change, because I was aware of the university and then the whole Union thing, and then we started working on some projects there with some...
Our first projects were at Kimmel.
Was it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we proceeded over to.
And then Union.
I remember being at
Okay.
Union, but I don't remember the Kimmel.
Yeah,
Okay.
really?
Yeah.
I thought it was
but
Kimmel when we first met, but
I
it
don't
doesn't
know.
matter.
Yeah.
But that
It's been a
doesn't
while
mean
ago.
Yeah.
I
it
wasn't
is.
always with him at all.
But yeah, and then so that was kind of always how I knew you, was almost what I was considering from the outside looking in as like a consultant for these places. Although you were on payroll, you worked for them, but every one of these places needed your expertise and understood what you were bringing to the table.
they needed a Vaughn.
Yeah, and I like, it was clear to me. I'm watching. I'm going, okay, yeah, all these people are going to start buying for this guy all around here.
The Vaughn father.
Yeah.
Give me the Vaughn.
Yeah, and I was just glad that I had something that was up your alley and that you believed in, because I knew, like, man, as long as I can stay in contact with Vaughn, he's going to open doors for me, and you did. So that was
Well, I
awesome.
appreciate that. Well,
Yeah.
my whole deal back when I was 19, 18, 17, back when I thought I might be able to farm, my whole focus was organics.
Yeah,
I've always been this organics guy until I wasn't, and it was just a progression of doing this for a long, not that I'm anti-organics at all. I'm very, very much pro-organics. It's just, it's not for everybody in every production situation. I mean, to grow organic apples where we are here in Missouri River Valley,
Not gonna work.
impossible.
Oh, okay.
Impossible. But western Nebraska, where there's no humidity, for disease, you need three things. You need the disease organism, you need the proper temperature, and you need the proper water level, to support that disease. Well, we have tons of humidity here. We got the disease organisms because it's everywhere, and we know we got the heat, right? Well, you go to Nebraska, and they got the disease organisms. Western Nebraska, they got the disease organism. They got the heat, but they don't have the moisture. So you can do organic orchards more easily in western Nebraska where there's less humidity. So organics is not always feasible, and I'm not talking down on organics in any way, shape, or form. I'm on the board of directors of the Nebraska Sustainable Agriculture Society, and we are about organics, and I'm 100% behind organics, but there is certain situations where it's just not practical.
I feel like that conversation is the exact conversation that I've had with so many people surrounding electric vehicles. It's like the people who in the electric vehicle industry who are in the position that you're in horticulture, are afraid to talk about all of the bad things about the electric vehicles. They're afraid to do what you just did right there, where you said there's a time and a place for these things, and it's not all good all day, every day, everywhere. There's a use case for these kinds of ways of doing things, these kinds of products.
My whole deal is success.
Yeah.
If I'm, number one, people have to learn from my mistakes, and I've made plenty, and that's the first thing I share is my mistakes. And so, when I say, it's very difficult not to grow an apple crop, a fruit crop, without using conventional chemicals in this neck of the woods, it's not impossible, but you need to make a viable living.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but I think that's being real and relatable to your point. Maybe to your point of the vehicles, maybe they're just not ready to be there yet, or with that argument, or they're just feeling like they need to defend it. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I mean, and I'm saying that, like, organic growing has been very trendy for a number of years. There's a lot of good that comes from it. There's a lot of reasons that make it not work, for whatever
Right.
case, and that's what he's talking about.
Yeah,
It's the same.
I like
it's the
it.
same
Yeah.
thing with EVs. There's a lot of good that come from these, but there's a lot of reasons why they don't work and why you can't have them in certain scenarios. And I feel like we just don't get the whole story on it.
It's just having an open conversation, an honest
Yes.
conversation.
That's what I'm
will
saying. He's
work?
being honest,
If
real.
I could, I would 100% grow organics because
Yeah, why not?
the tons of chemicals that I've actually sprayed in my lifetime,
Yeah.
I'm sure has had a physical detrimental effect on me.
Mm-hmm.
No doubt,
Sure.
no doubt about
Yep.
it. That's not to say that all organic compounds are.
Safe.
Yeah.
Well,
Healthy.
that's a tough word to use when
Yeah.
you're talking about pesticides.
Yeah.
Safe is no matter if it's organic or not.
Sure.
But the fact of the matter is, organics is misunderstood. The consumer thinks organics, it's not sprayed. You're not spraying pesticides.
Yep.
Excuse me. Anything that kills a pest is a ICID, is a side, So, yes, you are spraying pesticides. It may not be 7 that's, a harsh chemical, so to speak.
Yeah.
It may be pyrethrums, but pyrethrums are one of the most deadly compounds to fish, to aquatic life. So it's considered an organic, but it has its own drawbacks too.
Yeah.
So, it's education, and organics is a very hot topic.
Yeah, it sure is.
But I am 100% organics. I wish we could all grow organics, but at the same time, it's not always the practical thing to be doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Andy, back to I think you were going to say something about when I interrupted you about
Valas.
He just
Valas.
breezed over to Valas.
Valas. I always say it wrong.
The scope of that operation, and then that's just another job in your list of jobs where, hey, come on, Vaughn, come on in, help us with this pumpkin patch. It's a little bit more than just a pumpkin patch.
Yeah, it's
the cider,
the
apples?
hard cider, that all came. Yeah,
You did all that?
Well, no, I didn't do all that. I was part of all that.
Okay.
But the apples, the cider, flowers, landscape, sunflowers, corn, maize, 50 acres of pumpkins, all those things.
How many people do they bring through that place in a 3-week span in the fall?
I hate to be quoted, but over 300,000, probably closer to 400, and probably north of 400. It just depends.
Some of the folks listening won't know what it is, but it has to be the largest
agri-entertainment farm in
fall,
the Midwest.
Fall themed in the Midwest for
Oh,
sure.
it's not in the United States.
No.
I think commercials aired in Kansas City.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. You go through the parking lot at Valas on any given day, and you're going to go, what?
Yeah.
You walk into a place in St. Joe, Missouri, and you got your Valas logo on, and you open the door for somebody, and they go, "Wait, you work at Valas? We want to go there." You're going, seriously?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's kind of wild. It's not what you would think about if you've never seen it. Like, it's not like some theme park or something like that. It's in essentially what a lot of people would consider small town Nebraska. I mean, it's outside of the city, a family farm at one time that's been converted into this event place every fall, and it's just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. It's been around since we were kids, I think. I mean,
I think this year's night it's 38th, maybe 39th year coming up.
There you go.
So it's a tradition.
Yeah.
It is.
It is truly a tradition. It's an amazing place, all based on agriculture. You go there and you may say, well, how does this work on agriculture? But, there's something for everybody ag-related, I mean, you got apples and kids, I mean, there's 40 acres of high-density apples there. You've got antique machinery every place. Well, that takes care of Grandpa and Dad.
Yeah.
I mean, where do you see a slipcock tractor that's been restored? Well, at Valas,
Yeah.
Mom, the flowers in the landscape. I mean, Tim puts a lot of emphasis on the landscape and the beauty of the place, and that takes a ton of time. And so the whole thing about Valas is it's all about the family. The Vala family is dedicated to the family experience and making magical memories.
And there's so much to do for the kids. I mean,
You
from little itty bitties to my kids who, teenagers.
Right. And we always talk about this with like hunting and fishing and stuff, how get off the screen, get out of the city, go out. This is in the same vein of that, getting in touch with Mother Nature, the farm. Where does your food actually come from? How is it made?
Yes.
All that stuff can be discovered there and enjoyed. It's fun.
And this is just the fall, and it's just 6 weeks?
9 weeks.
9 weeks.
9
Okay.
weeks or
Yeah.
so.
So it's very, very limited, but
Very
so
limited.
many people come for it.
Yeah,
from miles away.
It's a phenomenal place. It's a phenomenal experience. It started as a U-Pick strawberry patch.
Did it?
Yeah, it started
Okay.
as a U-Pick strawberry patch that wasn't successful, and Then they did vegetables and sweet corn, and that wasn't successful. And
They just kept chucking away.
I've heard stories about that one of the men that I met through Tim was a longtime acquaintance of Tim's, and he had a letter that they were corresponding back and forth by written letter at that point. And he wrote Tim and says, "What are you going to do, Tim?" Because everybody was struggling. And Tim's response to him, and he has this letter hung on his wall, is, "Well, I think I'm going to plant more pumpkins."
Oh, wow. And then that's what it started.
And that's kind
and
of
he's
what
got
it
that
started.
letter?
Yeah. That's
So do you
cool.
feel like it's an honor to have worked for them?
Oh, I absolutely do.
Okay.
I absolutely do.
And probably anybody you've worked for in a sense.
Yeah, you're quite correct. I mean, some of the people, and I didn't even mention early on in my horticulture career, I've got 3 people that I consider my mentors. My very first one was a gentleman by the name of Gene Gage. Gene was a phenomenally intelligent person, phenomenally. He was actually the ambassador to Sweden for a number of years. And he was into herbs, and I worked at a place called the Acreage in Lincoln. It was really, we started the very first Made in Nebraska logo back then, and we would grow herbs and infuse them in vinegar. And this was like a strip mall type of deal that this gentleman by the name of Don Leonard put together. Anyway, long story, it was kind of a staple in the late 80s in Lincoln, and a lot of people would come. We'd open up in the morning for Kay Orr to come and shop, because it was all Made in Nebraska products. Who, if people don't remember, she was governor of the state of Nebraska. But Gene Gage was my very first, what I would consider, mentor. And then came Albert Dickey, was extremely instrumental in my career, who was the Dean of Extension at the University of Nebraska. And then after that, Ernie Wyneth, who was the person behind Kimmel Orchard and the Kimmel Foundation, had a very influential part of my life. So those 3 gentlemen, and many more, but those 3 gentlemen really helped propel me to what I ended up doing in life.
Yeah.
Nice.
Do you feel like you have done then the same with trying to mentor others?
I have tried. I would like to think I have.
Oh, I'm sure you have. I just didn't know if you've.
And I'd like to think that I will in the future.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
What you had mentioned something earlier about what you specialize in and some like food systems and some things like that. And we're going to wrap up here pretty soon, but I wanted to ask you, what do you think about our current food system and how everything works?
Wow. We really don't have
it's a lot,
enough time for that.
That was a big question, Ben, when you just said we're going to wrap it up.
Huge question. And I'm going to step on toes here.
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to step on toes
I figured,
here.
Yeah.
We like to tout in the state of Nebraska that we feed the world, Well, when you drive down the interstate and see the miles and miles of cornfield, we grow lots and lots and lots of corn. And that goes to lots and lots and lots of cattle, and that goes to lots and lots and lots of ethanol. But there's only so many societies that can afford the beef that our corn feeds. We don't eat ethanol, okay? Which then brings me back. So we feed the world, but we don't, because we can't even feed our hometowns locally. Okay.
Yeah.
And so this is why I have always been such an advocate of local foods, because there is a portion of life there, a portion of society that we as ag producers and we as farmers, and a small farmer, okay? So local foods generally is equated to a small producer.
Yep.
There's many, many opportunities for people to make a viable living. Won't become rich by any stretch of the imagination, but who does? But, you can raise a family. But by growing food locally, and if we had more of an emphasis towards that, I think we would be better off as a society. one of the things we like to say in local foods is know your farmer. Know where your food comes from, know your farmer. And there's nothing less important than that. I mean, if you can actually have a working relationship, a daily relationship in a lot of ways with that guy or that lady or that whoever that's growing your food for you, I mean, come on, you know?
Yeah.
Who do you trust?
Right.
Who do you trust? You know, so
Yeah.
local foods is in my world and in my psyche is probably the most important thing one of the most important things that we can do. Not to downplay agriculture in any way, big agriculture in any way, shape, or form. You know, when I was a kid, diversified agriculture meant the farm had corn, wheat, soybeans, hogs, chickens, maybe a few horses, right? Today, diversified agriculture means I grow corn, I grow soybeans, I sell seed corn, I might sell some fertilizer, and I might have another side business. That's diversified agriculture. Two totally different types of diversified agriculture. I contend which one's better,
Yeah.
you know, for society.
Yeah.
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 So-
Things have gone in certain directions, and some stuff out of control, some stuff, you know, out of necessity. But
And I'm not downplaying other,
I hear you.
know,
Yep.
in any
Yep.
way, shape, or form,
Yep.
because you know it's so important in the
Yep.
in the big picture. But individually, we as consuming citizens, you know,
yeah. And I agree with you in the with the idea that the further we as individuals get away from our food source, the worse that is for us. That we need to understand it. We need to understand where it's coming from. We need to understand who's growing it. We need to understand where it's grown, what kind of nutritional value it has, why we're putting it in our mouth.
why are we eating red peppers from the Netherlands that were grown in a greenhouse that a week ago they were in the Netherlands and today they're in, you know, whatever supermarket it is? What has it taken for that red pepper, orange pepper, yellow pepper, or whatever produce it is to get thousands and thousands of miles by air to the United States and then trucked? I mean, look at where we are in the Midwest.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you would think a lot of, again, my contention is someday Nebraska will be, especially with climate change, as we get warmer, certain parts of Nebraska will become vegetable producing regions, because even though they might lose a crop or two to a wintertime scenario, look at the price of land in California.
Yeah.
Look at the lack of water in California. Look at the miles from California to New York. Here in the Midwest, we're centrally located. Currently, we have a pretty decent water supply. Climate's changing a little bit, but it seems to me, in my psyche, that someday we'll be growing those things here because we have to.
Like it's worth the risk.
Yes.
For people to do it here instead of.
You know, you may lose a couple crops.
Yeah, that's
but,
for the winter.
Yeah.
The risk. Yeah.
I mean, it makes a ton of sense, but there's so many things that we do as a society that doesn't make sense.
Right.
You know, that kind of detracts from that.
Right.
You know, well, of course we get our red peppers or bell peppers from the Netherlands. Why wouldn't we?
Well,
You know?
yeah, exactly.
Well, we've talked about this before in terms of what we eat and why we eat and when we eat it. I firmly believe that we're very spoiled and privileged in one way or another. Like, if I want a red pepper right now, I can go to the grocery store and get it because it comes from anywhere in the world and it's always readily available.
Exactly.
Where, 100 years ago, if I wanted a red pepper, it better be summertime and it better be on the plant out back. Otherwise, I'm not getting one.
Unless
Right.
it's canned or
Right.
Yes, unless you had it canned and you had it saved.
And it's convenience.
And right,
Yes.
and that's how people's diets were structured, was around what was available to them in their local market, in their own backyard, that time of the year, unless it was canned and it was stored and it was preserved.
Irish and the potatoes,
Yeah.
you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's all changed so much. Everything's at our fingertips now. We can get whatever we want whenever we
Boom.
want.
Give me some Uber.
Yeah.
Uber Eats.
Sure.
Right now.
Season extension, extending seasons
Yep.
and, and making,
Yep.
growing situations and efficiency and irrigation and all the things that science has developed,
Yeah.
Whether, you want to think about it or not, agriculture at whatever level is all about science.
Mm-hmm.
All about science.
Yeah.
So,
I hear you.
And you're the leading science guy.
no. I'm just me.
He's the horticulture whore.
He's the Vaughn.
What'd you say?
You're the horticulture whore.
My dad. No. My dad
That
always
might be
used.
good.
My dad always used to say, "You can lead a horse to water, but you can't lead a horticulture."
Oh.
Damn.
Horticulture.
This recording's got jokes.
Yeah.
I liked the Vaughn father. That should be
Vaughn
your
father?
name. Yeah.
That is a good one.
No, I'm
Yeah.
kind of sticking with V Daddy.
V Daddy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you
go.
Okay.
That's another discussion.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what we'll call this podcast.
Yeah.
Well, Vaughn, we appreciate it, man. It's been good getting to know you from all those other different angles, all the things that I never knew, even over these past few years. Very appreciative of you.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Yeah, for sure. So hopefully folks enjoy this. We're going to do another episode in regards to your current workplace and some crazy things that are going on here in eastern Nebraska. So stay tuned for that. Anything else?
Sounds good.
I think that's it.
No? All right, Vaughn. We appreciate it, man.
Okay,
All right.
Thank
appreciate you.
See ya.
Peace.
See ya.